Welcome to our second installment of A Path to Enlightenment, Secrets of the Mahatma Letters. Today we're going to finish the foundational information that we started last session and then dive into letter number 1 of how many? How many letters are there total?
More than 100.
And are they all in the book?
Yes.
All right, without further ado, let's dive in.
Okay. Last time I mentioned that the letters were available on a website that used to be called theosophical.org, but that has changed as I found out. It is now called Theosophy.wiki. So if you go to the website Theosophy.wiki, it will take you to a page where you choose the language, and then once you choose the language, one of the first buttons that you can click on will take you directly to the discussion of the Mahatma Letters, and you can view the images of the actual letters themselves.
And we'll link that below in the description of this this video here as well. This entire book is available on that wiki.
I also mentioned last time that the Mahatma Letters went from 1880, in the late fall of 1880, to 1884. There were actually a couple, very few letters in 1885, but by then they were few and far between. There are actually a couple of other letters. I had mentioned that many of the pupils of the two Mahatmas had received personal notes from time to time, but there were two others that are kind of important. The very first letter that could be called a Mahatma letter arrived in 1880, and it was addressed to H.P. Blavatsky's aunt in Odessa. She had been gone traveling for, I think, 2 years or more, and they had not heard from her and were very concerned about whether she was alive, whether she was well. And something pretty strange happened, according to her aunt, because remember, HPB's mother had died when she was around 9 years old. So she was raised by family members, her grandparents and her aunts.
And this was in Odessa, which is in present-day Ukraine.
Exactly.
And that's where she was living at the time, but she had been traveling, like you mentioned.
Right. So one day her aunt went to the door, and there was an Asian man who delivered a letter to her personally. She took it from him, and he turned around, and she was watching him, and he disappeared before her eyes. So she had a physical letter in her hand, but the messenger who delivered it disappeared. And the letter was written in French, because all educated people in Russia spoke French in those days. And the letter said in French, "Don't worry about your niece and your family member, Helena. She has been ill, but she is well now, and she is in good hands, and before 18 moons, she will return to you." And she did.
So in 18 months.
For 18 months, yeah. So 18 months later, she did return. In a very strange fashion, there was a Christmas party going on, a family Christmas party, and she, with no announcement, showed up to this Christmas party. So it made quite a an impression when she arrived unexpectedly.
Do we know where she was? She was probably training with the masters.
Yes, she was, and she had lots of stories to tell, and they were completely enthralled, but we'll go into that later.
As a reminder for our audience, when we refer to the Mahatmas, the etymology of the word, we did discuss that, great spirit. We also refer to them as masters of wisdom. So we might interchange the two terms, masters and Mahatmas.
Paul last time actually mentioned the very last letter which was ever received, and that was in 1900. And it was, again, occurred in a very unusual manner. A member of the Theosophical Society in India had written to Annie Besant, who was the current president. No, she wasn't yet. She was living in India and working for the Theosophical Society, but she didn't become president until 1907. But she did a lot of lectures and teaching about theosophy. And a theosophist wrote a letter. He was a pranayamist, someone who studies the breath. And he was confused about some things, so he wrote a letter to her. And on the back of one of the pages of the letter was a one-page note from KH to Annie Besant. And at some point we may address that, but we won't go into the contents of that just yet.
I'm going to add one more thing to that. And since the text itself that we are studying is entitled The Mahatma Letters to A.P. Sinnett, we mentioned in our first session that there were two Englishmen who are the main recipients of these letters, but we just shared two other recipients. So there are a total now of 4 recipients.
And many others.
And
As I said, there were many pupils, students of the masters who did receive personal letters from time to time.
And our intention is to share with you and with anybody who's interested the wisdom that these enlightened beings have given to us and have kind of been hidden for the most part. Even though the book is available, the information is very esoteric. So that's our goal.
If you're interested in some of those other letters, there are 2 books. The first one is called Letters from the Masters of the Wisdom, first series. This one was published in 1919 and contains some of those personal letters to some students. The second one was published a few years later and has the same title, but is the second series. And this is the one that actually has an image of the letter that was written to HPB's aunt in Odessa. It's probably also important to note, since we're talking about these letters, that in 1880, there was only one theosophical book in existence, and that was Isis Unveiled. This, as you can see, is a very large 2-volume book that HPB wrote or published in 1877 when they were still in New York City. When I say that she wrote it, she wrote the manuscript for it, but all of the work that she did, not just Isis Unveiled, or the Secret Doctrine, but all of her works, her newspaper articles, her magazine articles, she had help from these 2 adepts and often from other adepts as well. People we don't even know about specifically who they are. And so her consciousness was very much fused with the consciousness of these other people. So whether they projected their thoughts onto her brain and then she wrote it out, or they projected an image in front of her that she could read from, and some of the people, including Alcott, mentioned that when she was writing, she was very intense, that there was obviously some kind of spiritual event that was taking place, and quite often her eyes would be focused somewhere in front of her as if she was writing from something projected right in front of her. And she often talks, and the masters talk about the Akash, or the Akashic records. And these are the records of everything that has happened in the past. This is how the Mahatmas are able to know the history of the world and humanity and everything that has happened in the past.
We'll paste a link to the wiki article on the Akashic records down below so you can read more about that.
Great idea.
Terry, some of our viewers are surely going to comment or ask, is this the same thing as channeling messages?
No. Well, let me leave that up to our viewers. When we read some of these letters and you see the depth of their thought and just how profound some of these concepts are that they are talking about, and the amount of information that they have and that they share about it, and then you compare that to channeled messages. You can go, here's an idea. Paul and I know some of these people who do channeling. You can go on YouTube and search
literally.
Search for channeling Maitreya. Search for channeling Maitreya, and you might stumble across somebody that we knew who claimed to be able to channel Maitreya. Listen to some of these channeled messages and compare them to the written messages that we have from the Mahatmas. And if you can't tell any difference, then we probably can't help you.
Thank you for saying that. And we're going to bring this up a lot. This is another example of why Raja Yoga and discernment is so important. And this is one of many times we'll be talking about this, because this is where it comes to us, you and us, to use our faculties of discernment, our faculties of clear vision, viveka shakti, to decide what is truth, what is not truth, what is real, what is not real. And no one can prove it but ourselves to ourselves. So,
and what you say is extremely important. Discernment is always the number one characteristic that a searcher, an aspirant, has to acquire. If you don't have discernment, you're going to be lost. Because, as you know, out in the wide world, there is 1 billion times more misinformation than there is truth. And you're going to have to figure out how to discern which is which. You have to be able to separate the gold nugget of real gold from the iron pyrite and from the mounds of ore and garbage that surround it. So that is the number one characteristic, is discernment.
Did you want to mention Sinnett's first book at all?
Yes.
Okay.
So the point was, HPB wrote the first book, theosophical book, and the second book that was ever written about theosophy was written by A.P. Sinnett in the form of The Occult World, which talked about some of the letters that he had received up through that point. This was about a year after he started the correspondence with the two Mahatmas. HPB and Alcott had started a magazine in India called The Theosophist in, I believe, October of 1879. So about a year before this. So they had the magazine, they had the book Isis Unveiled, and then that was the beginning of the plethora of theosophical writings that we have acquired since then. Now, we've been talking about H.P. Blavatsky a lot. And part of what we want to discuss is, how do you become a pupil? How do you present yourself if you choose to be trained to become an adept? Not necessarily in one life or two or three, but over many lifetimes. You have to start somewhere, right? So how do you do that? Well, she wrote towards the end of her life something that was very profound. This was actually found after she died, and was in her desk, I believe. Someone found this, and it was published later, but it describes the process of what one must do. So this is what she wrote. It says, "There is a road, steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind, but yet a road. And it leads to the very heart of the universe. I can tell you how to find those who will show you the secret gateway that opens inward only and closes fast behind the neophyte forevermore. There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot conquer. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. There is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount. For those who win onwards, there is reward past all telling, the power to bless and save humanity. For those who fail, there are other lifetimes in which success may come." And that, in a very few words, describes the entire process of how you can achieve enlightenment as the Mahatmas, the adepts, did themselves. So let's analyze that a little bit. There is a road steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind. Why should it be that way? Can't it be easy?
Because life is not always kumbaya.
A road, she uses the word road. We often speak about the path to enlightenment. Whether you call it a path or a road doesn't really matter. It indicates that other people have trodden this path before. Other people have found their way. So if we follow the same steps in our own way, we too will reach it. Paul and I often say there are 8 billion roads to enlightenment, but they all lead to the same goal. So no matter which road you take, you will reach that same goal of the enlightenment. And that's just one stage of enlightenment, that which the Mahatmas
There are other
achieved.
stages. And the analogy is very appropriate for that. If you think of a mountain peak, a mountaintop with different trails that go to the top, there could be hundreds, thousands, in our case we're talking about 8 billion because there are 8 billion humans approximately, paths or trails to the top of the mountain. But once you get to the top, there's only one top. And you are able to see the world clearly from that point. That's the purpose. And all the lessons and trials and thorns that you pass through and steep areas that you climbed are all lessons, and they're all preparations for being able to then see without our own personal biases, see the whole world, and then know how to help better from that high enlightened perspective, if you will. And that is a goal. That's one stage in the process of eternal enlightenment that we're talking about.
So why are there all of these perils? That sounds kind of scary, doesn't it? And in one of the Mahatma Letters, we will read This was in 1885, so actually one of the very last ones.
Terry, before you read that, I want to pose a question to our audience, though. I want to ask if you've ever been 100% on task, purposeful, intentional, on the way to your goal, whatever your goal happens to be at any stage in your life. Have you noticed that in addition to the stars aligning in certain ways, which does happen when you're on track, have you noticed there are also weird, unexpected resistances that come up from places that you wouldn't have expected? That happens. And this is what we're talking about. There are perils and there are trials and tribulations that we couldn't have even imagined because we're on such a streamlined, bow and arrow, straight path towards our goal. There will be resistance. That's the way it works, and will be tested. And that's what we're talking about here as well.
Yeah, why don't you read this one?
Okay.
Everything that's underlined here.
Okay. This is regarding the thorns and the trials and the perils. My friend, in the Masonic lodges of old times, the neophyte was subjected to a series of frightful tests of his constancy, courage, and presence of mind. By psychological impressions supplemented by machinery and chemicals, he was made to believe himself falling down precipices, crushed by rocks, walking spider web bridges in midair. It sounds like what Frodo had to do in Lord of the Rings a little bit.
Yes.
The lair of Shelob with all the spider webs. Passing through fire, drowned in water, and attacked by wild beasts. This was a reminiscence of and a program borrowed from the Egyptian mysteries. The West, having lost the secrets of the East, had, as I say, to resort to artifice. But in these days, the vulgarization of science has rendered such trifling tests obsolete. Thank goodness. The aspirant is now assailed entirely on the psychological side of his nature. His course of testing in Europe and India, we can probably say the Western world in India, right? Mm-hmm. Is that of Raj Yoga or Raja Yoga, and its result is, as frequently explained, to develop every germ, good and bad, in him, in his temperament. The rule is inflexible, and not one escapes, whether he but writes to us a letter, or in the privacy of his own heart's thought formulates a strong desire for occult communication and knowledge. We're going to need to translate a lot of that.
Yes.
This was from letter...
That was right at the very end.
Letter 452 in the spring of 1885.
Yes.
So this was KH writing to Sinnett?
Right.
Potentially? Okay.
So, if you offer yourself to be trained or to take the steps towards enlightenment, there is a long process of testing. A.P. Sinnett and Hume hated that idea. They didn't think that should apply to them. But the masters kept repeating, it is not up to us. We aren't the ones who make the rules. We have rules that we have to follow. And it's invariable. We can't make exceptions for you. If you're interested, you're going to have to do the same thing that all of our pupils have to do.
Because even enlightened masters are still part of a system, part of a hierarchy. They don't get to make up the rules. There's still a natural law that they need to abide by.
Here's the interesting thing. This is not at all like the corporate world in the world. They get to their position of authority, and I'm talking about organizations too, whether it's churches or nonprofit organizations or whatever. Those who get to the top are the ones who fight and make their way and kick people out of the way, and by hook or crook, they end up on top.
By hook or crook.
This doesn't work that way at all. It isn't because you have this great desire and you're willing to get rid of any other people who might get higher than you do. This is completely out of love for humanity and by your own spiritual, not aspiration, but the spiritual enlightenment that you have achieved. And they recognize each other's level of achievement because they know what it takes to get to it. So there is no fighting amongst themselves as to who is going to have what position and who is over another person. That doesn't occur at all in this spiritual hierarchy. So the testing part of it, as they pointed out, was to see what you're made of. Do you have the stuff that it requires? And again, as they pointed out, it is done entirely on the psychological side.
Let's give an example. So would this be done in waking time when thoughts come in, emotions come in, oh, I'm not good enough to do this, oh, I'm scared of that? Is that what we're talking about?
That can be part of it, but a lot of this happens during your sleep. You may have very vivid dreams. You've all probably dreamed at one point of falling off a cliff or something similar and woken up in a panic. So there are tests like this to see if you have learned how not to react to that. For one thing, if you're in a dream state, you're operating on the astral plane, most likely, almost certainly on the astral plane. Very seldom is it any other plane than that. But everything on the astral plane is complete fantasy. It's Maya, totally. And so you can't be harmed on the astral plane. If you dream that somebody stabs you with a knife, you're not going to die. If you dream that you fall off of a high cliff, you're not going to die.
But the physical body in the real physical plane does react.
It does, and we don't know, but there are people who dreamed that they were falling, and because of the physical emotional reaction, had a heart attack or some other health emergency that caused them to die. The severe reaction could actually cause the death.
Mm-hmm. It could. And in lesser examples, the heart rate rises of the person who's sleeping. So there usually is some physical component.
Yes.
Does it always happen psychologically, though? I mean, wouldn't it stand to reason that our general life experiences are tests as well?
Everything is a test. How do you interact with other people? Mm-hmm. How do you treat other people? Is it motivated by kindness and by your love of humanity? Or is there even an element of selfishness? Or does your ego come into play? Is that more important than someone else's well-being?
Let's remind our viewers that by this point, the point where the perils and thorns and steep sections of our path come about, that's after we've raised our hand, so to speak, and said, hey, I want to be of service to the universe. I want to be part of the spiritual leadership of our planet. And then we're given the test to really see if we want to still raise our hand. So we've volunteered ourselves for this. And then, Terry has mentioned several times, the adepts or masters or Mahatmas are then observing us. They're keeping a watchful eye. They're not expending too much energy yet. We haven't gained that gift yet, but they're watching. And so these trials and tribulations are just being observed physically and psychologically.
So the next part is this road leads to the very heart of the universe. What in the hell does that mean? It leads to the very heart of the universe.
The Andromeda Galaxy? I don't know. Where is it? Black hole somewhere?
I don't know. But again, there is a letter that kind of helps us realize what they may be talking about. Here, I'll let you read that. And this is a letter to A.O. Hume.
Okay. Letter 284 from October of 1882. The world of force is the world of occultism, and the only one whither the highest initiate goes to probe the secrets of being. Guided by his guru, the chela first discovers this world, then its laws, then their centrifugal evolutions into the world of matter. To become a perfect adept takes him long years, but at last he becomes the master. The hidden things have become patent, and mystery and miracle have fled from his sight forever. He sees how to guide force in this direction or that. That's interesting. It's like a tantric master. To produce desirable effects. That's manipulating prana and matter and energy. The secret chemical, electric, or odic properties of plants, herbs, roots, minerals, animal tissue are as familiar to him as the feathers of your birds are to you. Wow.
Remember, he was an ornithologist.
One who studies birds. That's funny. Learn first our laws and educate your perceptions, dear brother. Right direction your will and you will become a teacher instead of a learner. Control your Control your involuntary powers and develop in right direction your will and you will become a teacher instead of a learner. Occultism leads to the very heart of the universe.
Well, and so that's the point, is that when you study Theosophy, ancient wisdom teachings, the Mahatma Letters, this is the path that teaches you how life operates. How did it come to be? Why does it exist? It gives you all of these answers that people have wondered about for hundreds of thousands of years. Why are things the way they are?
Why did the Big Bang happen? What happens after? Is there another bang? Are there other everything? The heart of the cosmos.
Right. So if you have a religion that doesn't teach this, then what's the purpose of that religion? Right? Or philosophy. A religion is a philosophy. All right.
And then the requirements. And then she gives us the 3 requirements.
Yes, that's right. And what's the first one?
Courage.
And we kind of learned that about already, because through all of the testing, you're going to have to demonstrate courage and your ability to overcome fear more than anything.
Dauntless courage.
Paul, what was one of the things you did to overcome fear?
Oh my goodness, I've done a few things. One was going to the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. of Natural History, into the insect section. Is that what you're referring to? Well, there are a few that I've done a couple. And I held like an Amazonian cockroach that big, like a giant, because I had always been really scared of bugs. And so I held this gargantuan, looked like a prehistoric, they are prehistoric, insect in my hand. So I tested myself there.
And you were how old?
I was actually a teen. I drove, so I was at least 16, maybe 18.
Oh.
Yeah.
And what
19.
else did you do? What about scuba diving?
Exactly that, yes. Growing up with asthma has always given, most asthmatics have an element of claustrophobia as well, since we can't breathe sometimes, or it's challenging. So I tried to learn scuba diving, and it did not go well at first, but I knew that this was a way for me to overcome some of the fear of this and to psychologically overcome that, because a big part of asthma is mental. It's physical too. There are clearly some chemical reactions, but it's also largely, it's an odd kind of disease because it's both. So I practiced learning to scuba dive, no nose breathing. It's just mouth breathing. You have to trust this system, these tanks and everything. And
you had to go
water.
30 feet underwater.
Yes, I had to do one in the nighttime also, and practice taking the mouthpiece out and putting my secondary one in, then changing with someone else as a safety.
And taking
the whole mask thing. Also, some of you who are my yoga friends know that when I first started with hot yoga, Bikram yoga, that was another challenge, because when the class starts and the teacher comes in the room and closes the door, when I first started, it felt like there was like a vacuum and all the air was sucked out of the room, and I'm like, can I even breathe right now? because it was hot. And then I looked around and I played the game with myself and I said, hey, they're okay. These other 35 people. And overcoming fears, I think, is a huge thing in spiritual progress.
Now, when you did your scuba test, was it in Lake Mead?
One was, and then one was off the coast of San Diego.
Oh, well, that was lucky. No, I did the one at Lake Mead, and
dirty.
Those of you who don't know much about Lake Mead, and you do have to go 30 feet deep.
Yep.
We lost track of our instructor. We didn't know where she was. So, and you can't see 3 feet in front of your eyes.
It's our clean water in Lake Mead.
It's not very clean at all. So yeah, that's a little disconcerting when you're 30 feet deep and your instructor is nowhere in sight. And so we waited until she finally found us.
At a future time in our courses, there might be an opportunity to go over some practical stages or steps of how to overcome fear.
And it's all, as Paul mentioned, it is all psychological, entirely. So that's what you have to deal with, is learn to overcome fear, to have dauntless courage. One of the other things that I did was skydiving. I was more than a little bit, I didn't mind going up on a tall building. I had faith in the contractor and in the architect and the engineers that wasn't dangerous, but I certainly didn't feel confident enough to go rock climbing. But I decided that if I was going to overcome that fear, then I could at least try skydiving, and I did. And so dauntless courage is the first quality that we have to develop. What is the second?
Purity.
Purity, spotless purity.
And this is not just this is mainly not of the physical body. We can all understand that being healthy in our bodies is obviously important, eating healthy foods and getting rest. But what we're talking about is much more mental and then subsequently emotional. The masters will not sacrifice their level of refinement of consciousness, of heightened awareness, by connecting with someone who is impure. Why would they do that? They operate at such a high level and help the world at such a high level that if they allowed impure thoughts from one of their students in, it would just harm their work.
They are extremely sensitive to all vibrations, and they can tell instantaneously the quality of your own vibrations. We all emanate, and that's what constitutes our aura. Yes. Is this whole field of vibrations that we exude at every moment of our lifetime. We can't escape it. There is no way to escape it. So they are at such a purified level that, for example, they couldn't come into this room right now. And it doesn't have horrible vibrations as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I think it has quite calm and quite peaceful vibrations.
So we've got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and electricity and things that are...
And neighbors.
And neighbors and cars.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, there is a reason why they live in very remote areas of the world. In Raja Yoga, what are some of the things that would be considered necessary to achieve purity of thought, action?
If we have negative thoughts about ourselves or anyone else, learn to replace our thoughts with positive thoughts. So
what about honesty?
Of course, honesty is part of that. Integrity, and that's towards ourselves and to others. Harmlessness to other life forms, and of course to ourselves. Truth is a big one though, because many people think that white lies are okay, but white lies are still lies. So
And according to Raja Yoga, is a white lie okay?
at the highest levels that we're talking about, unfortunately, it's not okay because it's a lie.
Even if it would save your own or someone else's life?
I love these discussions, and I a lie is a lie, and it's impure, even if its intentions are to save the life of an innocent person.
So are you saying that the end doesn't justify the means?
There is no gray area. There is no gray area in the highest levels.
This is a tough one,
Raja
isn't
Yoga.
it?
It's extreme. This is why it's secret, really. But if we're going to reach the highest levels, the end never justifies the means.
What about a religious organization, or what even about theosophy? If someone thought that the existence of your organization, your religion, whatever, is it's necessary for me to be a little bit duplicitous or to maybe tell a white lie so that another person doesn't cause trouble or disbelieve it, or
you know, if we're if we're honestly willing to accept the karma that comes from lying,
that's okay.
Like we said, there's no gray area. Will I tell white lies in this life? I will. Do I also believe with all of my being that I will receive karma that is unpleasant from the lie? Yes. So again, if you know what you're doing and you're making a conscious choice, sure, go for it. But
okay, I can go with that. No, let me read something that
Please.
KH actually said in the letter number 48, or on page 48 rather. He said in 1881, and he's talking to A.P. Sinnett, if you believe in my friendship for you, if you value the word of honor of one who never during his whole life polluted his lips with an untruth, then do not forget the words I once wrote to you. And then he goes on to remind him of something that he wrote to him. But what did he say? In this life, no untruth has ever polluted his lips. That's quite a statement.
wow, even a white
Yeah,
or a gray.
yeah. So apparently, to be a Raja Yogi, you have to be pretty highly evolved. So we can see what's cut out for us.
What's the last requirement? Let's see. We have courage, purity,
And strong intellect. That seems a little strange, doesn't it?
in a way. We don't want to consider this to be cunning. We don't need to be cunning. We need to be smart. We need to understand how to put things together and solve problems. And
Can't we just believe in somebody else that is?
sure, yeah. Let's see how that goes.
And this brings up something very interesting. In occultism, in this spiritual path that we're talking about, there's no room for vicarious atonement. We can't just put our faith in somebody and say, I believe in you. I believe in KH. I believe in Maitreya. I believe in this very high person. And if I do everything that that person tells me to do, I don't have to question it. I just know that I will achieve.
Wait, so these enlightened beings are not gods then?
No. There is a stage way beyond what we're talking about where they might be considered gods, but they would be nothing at all like the gods of the religions that we know.
With that being said, since they're not gods, they don't want to be worshipped like gods.
No, absolutely not. They don't seek our approval. They don't seek our worship. And trying to placate them or to placate them or to entice them by your worshiping them, that wouldn't sway them one iota. In fact, they don't even care if we know about them.
They're very patient, aren't they?
They're extremely patient. They're also extremely elusive. If you haven't achieved a certain degree of intelligence, and it's simply that, intelligence, the ability to learn things fairly quickly and to use them in a practical manner to change things, then you have more work to do. It's that simple. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you have a college degree of any type. I have known people who have never been to college, and some who have gone to college with no intention of gaining any kind of diploma, including KH. KH went to 2 different universities at least that we know of, and there's no indication that he ever sought any kind of diploma or degree. That meant absolutely nothing to him. So some of the most intelligent people that I have known have no credentials, so to speak. So it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with whether or not you do have the intellect necessary to achieve what we're talking about. And all of these adepts are extremely intelligent. And they're not all in the same field. Some of them are experts in one area. Some are experts in another.
The 3 that we're mainly talking about here, they all did go to a university somewhere?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We only know of one that went to a university.
That's Kutumi. Okay.
Let's just mention very briefly Kutumi, KH, that we talk about a lot, and who wrote the majority of these letters, was the younger of the 2 adepts that we talk about the most. And he was kind of like the younger brother of Moria. He apparently was in his 20s, we expect, when he did go to the university.
Oxford?
Oxford, and we didn't mention, did we?
I don't believe so.
No. He went to Oxford University for a time, and he also went to Heidelberg University in Germany for a while. I don't know if he speaks German, but he speaks excellent French. He speaks excellent English and several other Indian languages.
Or spoke, if he's...
Spoke. And by the way, we don't know if these adepts that we talk about are still in physical existence. They may have moved on beyond that. So he was from the Punjab, or his family was from the Punjab region of India, and but they had lived for quite some time in Kashmir, the very northern tip of India. And that, of course, we haven't mentioned yet. But when we talk about Tibet, in the old days, people would refer to either Greater Tibet or Little Tibet. And Greater Tibet is the area which is now part of China because they took it over. Whether or not there are still any adepts there, I have no idea. They may have moved into northern India instead. But the other area of Tibet was called Little Tibet, and that is in Kashmir and is still part of India. So we will find that the adepts that traveled a lot between different monasteries. They were both lamas. They were highly regarded in Tibetan Buddhism and had accepted Tibetan Buddhism as the purest form of religion. That didn't mean that they believed everything about it, but they were highly revered by the Tibetan Buddhist monks as great teachers. Maurya, for example, was a Rajput prince. We mentioned last time he was 6'8" tall, and apparently extremely handsome. HPB first met him in 1851 when she was 20 years old. He was at a world fair that was happening in London, and they had a whole contingency of Indian princes, and he was one of them, riding on a horse in a parade, and she rushed up to him, and he kind of motioned to her not to come closer, and the next day she was in Hyde Park, and he was there. And he sat down and talked to her for a long time and told her that they had in mind a mission for her.
She ran to him because she had been having visions of him.
She had seen him in visions. She
prior
knew
to
who he was.
ever seeing him in person.
Exactly. That was the first time she ever saw him in person, but she knew exactly who he was. And he motioned to her not to come closer, but the next day he arranged to meet her. He knew where she was going to be and probably gave her the idea to go to the park,
Hyde Park.
to see him.
So she most likely was one of the souls who raised their hand, so to speak, spiritually, early on in her life to be of service, and they were ready for her. She had the qualifications to take on this gigantic task of what was in store, right. The theosophical system.
And remember, in our first session, we mentioned that they had been searching for 100 years for an individual who could fill that role. And she was the only one, imperfect as she was, to be available. And the rest is history. All right, we're almost to the end of this part.
Okay, so the 3 requirements, and then what are the rewards?
What are the rewards? For those who win onwards, there is reward past all telling. And what is that?
Well, in her words, the power to bless and save humanity.
What does it mean to be saved, though?
Well, that sounds like something a God would do, to bless and save humanity. So saving, yeah, what does that mean? Does that mean saving you from what? From making a mistake, from tripping and stubbing your toe? Or what does saving you mean?
Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. They mention, not in any one place, but in general, that the only persons who are saved are those who have reached the 4th level of enlightenment, 4th initiation. And it's not even at the beginning of that. It's right at the verge of becoming an adept. That is what they consider being saved. It means you can no longer fail as an aspirant. You have reached that point where you're secure, you're safe, your future evolution is secure.
Now, we haven't talked about initiations yet, and we're going to dive a little bit more into that, but this is something that I know our viewers are going to really want to hear. What does it mean to be initiated, and first initiation? So just so we're clear, though, you're saying after an individual has started on this path and has been accepted as a student or a chela, and they've taken first initiation, second, third, they can still make a large enough mistake in their life that they would essentially fall back or have to repeat a grade in school?
There's a whole series of steps you have to take to become an adept. And there are minor initiations and there are major initiations. And I've never heard anyone who can delineate all of the minor initiations. The major initiations are spoken of as number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and that's about as high as we can go in our imagination even.
And the skeptical person will say, who made this up? Who created this program of advancement? Is it something that Maitreya did? Did Jesus make it? Who said, okay, on planet Earth, they're going to have these stages? Or is it kind of just an accepted process?
It's part of the ancient wisdom teachings. No one knows the origin of it. It's gone on. It's not just on our planetary system. Mm-hmm. It has existed on other planetary systems and supposedly in other galaxies. We don't know.
I think we should mention too that I particularly have a linear thinking mind. Like I like to see things written out. Give me the bullet points. First stage, second stage. It might not be like that. They happen, but it may not be specific like I like to think of it as, but something does transform in you when you move through these processes.
Yes, and that is what we're talking about here, and I'm glad you brought that up, is self-transformation. Self-transformation.
It's a process.
Yes. And you probably know the toys, the Transformers, who become, they are just, a
car, like a Volkswagen or something. And then
exactly. But then they become this superhero.
Yeah.
Turn into a superhero. And that's really what we're talking about. Everyday people like you and me who, through this gut-wrenching process, turn into supermen, superhumans, able to help save humanity, meaning giving them the same opportunity to reach enlightenment that we're hoping to reach in the next, who knows how many lifetimes. And it doesn't matter whether it's in 3 lifetimes or 30 lifetimes or whatever. Once you make up your mind, you will achieve it.
So in other words, to save humanity, like Terry said, it's to help everyone achieve the fourth level of initiation, which means that we're no longer capable of failing. We've reached such a heightened state of purity and expansion of consciousness that we are no longer, and to tie this back to the very beginning of why we're doing this course in the first place, it's to help eliminate suffering. At that stage, there's no more of the same kind of suffering that normal humans experience. And then we will help everyone. We have the power to then help everyone do the same.
Yes, and we can't save everybody. We can only, as the Mahatma, the high supervisor of the adepts that we're talking about, the Mahatma, the highest level of Chohans, said that even the Buddha didn't achieve that. He wasn't able to save everybody, even with his energy and his level of enlightenment. He could only inspire a relatively small portion of humanity to embark on this path.
When we say the power to bless humanity, is that a pranic gift? How is a blessing?
I think it's really the energy. Mm-hmm. A lot of people would be repelled by their energy because it doesn't mesh with theirs. So, but of those who have made an effort towards purifying their own aura and their own energy field, if they felt that, it would be amazing. In fact, let me read something that one of our favorite authors wrote. His name is I.K. Taimni. He wrote a book called Science and Occultism. And this quote that I'm going to have Paul read is in the preface of this, or the introduction of this book. And it gives us a little bit of insight into what we've just been talking about.
regarding initiation.
Yes.
Another side note about I.K. Taimni, he's also the author. If you've studied yoga philosophy with me or taken a teacher training with me, you've heard a lot about this author, I.K. Taimni. His commentary on the Yoga Sutras is our favorite one. Okay. From the Science of Occultism. All right, page 14. It's the preface. There is yet another method of gaining knowledge concerning the deeper realities of existence. This is through initiation. When knowledge is imparted from one who knows and has the necessary power and authority to do so, to a qualified disciple by temporarily raising the receptivity of the latter by occult methods. Owing to this artificial sensitivity induced in this manner, the consciousness of the recipient is temporarily raised to a higher level, and he is able to perceive the particular truth as a direct experience in consciousness. And that's different than receiving a message or words. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Mm-hmm. This kind of sensitivity does not, however, last and is not under one's control, as it has been induced temporarily by an external agency, by the descent of particular kinds of forces in the vehicles by esoteric methods. But it generally sets in motion processes which culminate in the capacity to gain these realizations voluntarily and by one's own efforts. Yes! This is really the realm of yoga. Mm-hmm. Information on initiation, that was.
Yes. Yes. So remember Eckhart Tolle's experience?
Yes.
Does that...
Exactly.
Exactly.
It could also be considered a satori in a sense, or a being touched, isn't...
Exactly. And that's exactly what he's explaining, is one of these adepts...
Or blessed, really. This is what the priest does, right?
Sees someone who has potential, and at the right moment, when they think that they have merited this intervention, this interaction, they simply touch them, in metaphysically speaking.
Could be physical, but usually metaphysical.
And it changes their consciousness immediately. It's sometimes referred to as cosmic consciousness. And there are a number of people who have experienced it.
Meaning a temporary expansion of widening your view. Imagine if all of a sudden you had 1,000 eyeballs all around the world and you saw everything all of a sudden, but then they closed again and you're like just back to 2 eyeballs.
Except that it does last. It happens like immediately. We know someone in the Theosophical Society that this has happened to, and he explained it as he was in Riverside Park in New York City, and he said it happened when he took one step down a stairway, and from one step to the next, it was like everything had changed. He was no longer the same person he was. He did not see things the same way. And this is exactly how it happens. It's instantaneous and it's mind-blowing. Eckhart Tolle said for 2 years he sat on a park bench and just marveled in his increased insights into the universe and into how things worked.
I just love how Taimni says it's for a reason, though.
To bless and save humanity. That's the reason.
To show us that we can do it on our own.
And notice that this it's not a flash. It's not like and gone. It is a momentary heightening of consciousness. I mean, extremely high. And the descent is very, very slow. It could be a year. It could be longer than a year. For some people, it may just be a few months. Eckhart Tolle mentioned 2 years. And it does decline. But that person is forever changed.
It sets
will
in
never
motion.
be the same person.
Of
again.
course. How could you be after you see the
Exactly.
height? It sets in motion the processes which culminate in the capacity to gain these realizations voluntarily and by one's own efforts. I got to bring this up. A lot of people say that this is what plant medicine does, what ayahuasca does. It gives you that, it rips the veils away in a very sometimes harsh manner so you can see things that you didn't previously see, for the purpose of showing you what's possible for us to do it on our own.
Yeah. And what would the Mahatmas say about that?
Well, how pure are you, by the way? How pure is your body? How pure are your emotions? Have you been ingesting anything that's impure? And then the answer for some people would be, yes, it's from the earth. And so I'm just bringing it up.
Well,
just
I can just, all I know is that I know people who have done some of these things. When I was young and stupid, I tried LSD one time. And yeah, it was amazing. I just felt like extreme creativity. Mm-hmm. Like I could create TV commercials out of nothing. Mm-hmm. But it didn't last. It didn't change me. It didn't make me any more enlightened or nothing of that manner. I see other people who have tried ayahuasca and other types of hallucinogenics, and I don't see that they are any better a person, that their morals are improved or their ethics or their love of humanity, or that their ego has been diminished in any way. So basically what I say, and I think Paul agrees, is that if you have no control over it, then it's not going to be, even with this enhanced level of consciousness, you still have control over it. And the Mahatmas will say that they are not always Mahatmas at every moment of their life. They can turn it on and off. They can be ordinary human beings if they want to be. But if they want to tune into their Mahatmic consciousness, then they open that up. And it's the same way with these hallucinogenics. If you can't control it and turn it off in an instant, then it's not going to be a key to enlightenment. There's no magic potion that you can take. It's hard work. This kind of goes along with the levels of initiation.
Sure.
The remainder of that quote where K.H. was telling A.P. Sinnett that he had never told a lie in his entire life, he said, if you believe what I'm telling you, you will not forget the words I once wrote to you. Of those who engage themselves in the occult sciences, he who does it must either reach the goal or perish.
Ooh.
Once fairly started on the way to the great knowledge, to doubt is to risk insanity. To come to a dead stop is to fall. To recede is to tumble backward, headlong into an abyss. He's talking about a certain level, and my inclination is it's towards around the third initiation, that you remember that there is a gate, a secret gateway that opens inward only and closes fast behind the neophyte forevermore. When we say fast, it may mean quickly, but it also means tight. It's closed. It's not ever going to open again. Up until
Once
that
you know,
time,
you know, kind of thing.
up until that point, you can always just kind of, you say, you know what, I'm going to step back and kind of go back into my old lifestyle and leave this society. And you can do that. You can do that for years at a time, lifetimes if you want. But once you reach a certain point, you can no longer go back because you have evolved beyond that point, and there's no reason you would want to. It would be like a college graduate saying, you know what, I really liked fourth grade. I think I'm going to go back into the fourth grade again. How do you do that? You can't, because you're way beyond that. So you can't go back into the world that you used to know. You have no choice but to keep going onward until you reach that moment of safety where your continued progression after that. So you can actually kind of be in limbo for years or maybe a couple of lifetimes, but there's no reason to do that. If you understand, you keep plodding, you keep moving forward, no matter how much effort, how much pain it is. And what's the last phrase?
For those who fail, there are other lifetimes in which success may come.
And that is kind of sad, isn't it?
Well, it brings a tear to my eye because it's beautiful, though, because it's actually not that sad. I mean,
no, I mean, it's kind of a dichotomy, isn't it? It's like, you can still fail, and yet you're not irretrievably lost. There's still another chance.
Yes, eternally, and that means that we're all going up. The whole universe is evolving slowly, with free will, of course, but that's the direction. It's not down.
There's a phrase in the Bible that I always liked, and I probably interpret it differently from most Christians, and that is, and I, if I be lifted up, will raise all men with me. In other words, an enlightened, and I think this was Jesus who said that, I, if I be lifted up, will raise all men with me. So when these adepts achieve adeptship, all of humanity is blessed by that. All of us are giving vicariously and without any effort on our part an easier way to ascend ourselves, because they have trodden the path before us, and they have made it easier for us. They have put out influences and radiated energy into the world which will help lift us up. So for the ones who are achieving now, it's going to be incredibly difficult. But 100,000 years from now, it will be incredibly easy. So it's up to you, it's up to all of us, whether we want to achieve quickly or whether we're willing to wait until it becomes a lot more easy. We're going to wrap this up in just a few minutes, but a few final thoughts about what we have been discussing for the past hour and 15 minutes. There's one letter that talks about a forlorn hope. And let me just read it to you, a section from it. Again, it's K.H. in 1881, who says to Sinnett, "What I meant by the forlorn hope comment was that when one regards the magnitude of the task to be undertaken by our theosophical volunteers, we may well compare it to one of those desperate efforts against overwhelming odds that the true soldier glories to attempt." So, in other words, you have something of great importance that you're striving to achieve, and even though you know that your chances of success are minuscule, you still do it. You still do it because you are committed to the service of humanity. Even if you think that all of the efforts that you put into it are going to come to naught. And the hope is that one or two individuals maybe will get some inspiration from what you have done and what you have said, and that will be the reward. And if there aren't even one or two, it still is worth the effort, because the energy is out there. The energy is in existence in the world, and one way or another, it will have an effect. Maybe not immediately, but in the long run, there's no way but what it will affect other people when they are ready for it. No intention made with goodwill and love of humanity at heart can ever be a complete failure. Some of the spiritual practices that they recommend: fasting, meditation, purity of thought, word, and deed, silence for certain periods of time, to enable nature herself to speak to him who comes to her for information, governing of the animal passions and impulses, utter unselfishness of intention. The guru can only assist him with his experience and willpower, but can do no more until the last and supreme initiation, which would be the fifth initiation. So they can't do it for us, and they emphasize this again and again, that the adept is not created. It's a self-transformation process. Only that individual can do what is required, make the effort to become. So in one place he says, you have to, and we'll see this in the next session, I believe it is. He says you have to take heaven by storm. Mm-hmm. You have to storm the gates of heaven. In other words, you make this happen. You make the masters pay attention to you.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of.
You
Right.
make it so that they can't turn you away. You have so many qualities that will help in their
courage,
efforts.
That's why the courage, the purity, and the intellect.
Exactly.
Willpower.
Yes.
The first several.
You have to become indispensable in the work.
The yamas and niyamas have with the willpower, the tapas, which is your dedication, drive, perseverance. These are very, very important.
Yes. The spiritual practices, brotherhood and love of humanity, patience and perseverance is of paramount importance.
That's an alliteration too. Patience, perseverance, paramount.
And in January of 1882, K.H. said this: the pathway through earth life leads through many conflicts and trials, but he who does not to conquer them can expect no triumph. Let then the anticipation of a fuller introduction into our mysteries under more congenial circumstances, the creation of which depends entirely upon yourself, inspire you with patience to wait for, perseverance to press on to, and full preparation to receive the blissful consummation of all your desires. Patience and perseverance are of paramount importance. And this is, again, one of the dangers. We both know individuals who thought they were so far advanced that they could press forward much more quickly than the average person could. and they attempted more than they were capable of. And what is the result? In some cases, insanity was the result. We know more than one person
We do.
who tried exercises that they should not have, and who had very bad results from them, to the point that it not only affected the rest of this lifetime, but very possible their next lifetime. So impatience is not something you can just discount. You have to be very, very careful. So when we talk about the dangers of this path, it's not hyperbole. It's actual, and it has dire results, as both of us know from personal experience with some of our friends and in relatives even. The Master-chela connection, we'll end with that one. This is really pretty profound.
This is an excerpt from letter 482 from K.H. to Hume in 1880. He's speaking about the close tie that forms between a married couple as time goes by. Do you know that between adept and chela, master and pupil, there gradually forms a closer tie, for the psychic interchange is regulated scientifically, whereas between husband and wife, unaided nature is left to herself. As the water in a full tank runs into an empty one, which it is connected with, and as the common level will be sooner or later reached according to the capacity of the feed pipe, so does the knowledge of the adept flow to the chela, and the chela attains the adept level according to his receptive capacities. At the same time, the chela, being an individual, a separate evolution, unconsciously imparts to the master the quality of his accumulated mentality. The master absorbs his knowledge, and if it is a question of language he does not know, the master will get the chela's linguistic accumulations just as they are, idioms and all, unless he takes the trouble to sift and remodel the phrases when using. Okay, Moria, who does not know English and has to use Alcott's or the OL's language, old lady, HPV.
Yeah, they would refer to HPV sometimes as the old lady.
Oh my gosh. He has to use Alcott's or the old lady's language. So you see, it is quite possible for me to catch HPB's or any other chela's ideas about you without meaning to do you any injustice. For whenever we find such ideas, unless trifling, we never proceed to judge and render our sentences merely on the testimony of such borrowed light, but always ascertain independently and for ourselves whether the ideas so reflected in us are right or wrong.
So now you get a little bit of inclination as to why this purification process is necessary. If the adept is going to have any chance of working through you as an individual, that can only happen if the purity of your vibrations, the purity of your thoughts and your actions, and the purity of your motives are such that he is able to interact with you and join into a very personal relationship. So, as he's pointing out, it's far more intimate than the relationship between a husband and wife, because you are in touch with each other's mind. And it works both ways. Up to whatever capacity the pupil has, he or she can absorb the thoughts and the knowledge of the master, the adept, and vice versa. If the pupil is an expert in a certain field, in computer science, in history, in astronomy, in human psychology, that adept who is in tune with that person can absorb that knowledge as well. But as he pointed out, they have to be very careful if they want to make sure. There is an effort that comes into play sometimes if they don't want to inadvertently pick up something that may not be entirely accurate. They may have to do their own process of purifying the thoughts before they share them with someone else. So that's just the insight into what this relationship ends up being. Obviously not in the beginning, not anywhere close to the first stages, but eventually that is the realm, that is the level of enlightenment that HPB had achieved. Because these adepts were able to work through her. They sometimes actually stepped into her physical body where she psychically removed herself and could observe everything that was going on. They could use her hand to write, and it would be in her handwriting, and they would be talking or writing their own thoughts, and she would be observing and learning from the side. So this is just a little bit of insight as to what some of these secrets of the Mahatmas entail. We didn't get to letters 1 and 2 as we had hoped.
But we gave lots of excerpts from other letters.
We did. So
we did dive into
I hope that our viewers are gaining a little bit of insight as to who these individuals are, why we should pay attention to them,
very much so.
And the quality of their writing. Again, if you hear of people who channel these masters,
or other masters,
compare them with these.
Yeah.
Compare those channeled messages with these, and just ask yourself: is that the same level of enlightenment, of wisdom, of understanding?
We should wrap up for today. We'll see you for our next video.
All right, and we express our gratitude to our viewers and wish you well. Happy holidays to all.
Namaste. Nice.